Why did Helloween break up and how did they reunite? Back in late 2016 we had Kai Hansen and Michael Kiske, or Mihail if you want to use the correct pronunciation, rejoin their old band Helloween, who are considered the granddaddies of the power metal genre. They've been busy touring on the Pumpkins United tour, and since I already talked about Iron Maiden's former members, I wanted to also make a video about why Helloween's original lineup broke up in the early 1990s, because they're also one of my favorite metal bands. I'm not gonna go through everybody who was in the band, but I'm going to extend this video to at least cover Michael Kiske's exit, because, well, big shocker, he wasn't actually a founding member. Okay, the story of Helloween starts in the early 1980s when the band was originally just a four-piece. We had drummer Ingo Schwichtenberg, guitarist Michael Waycath, bassist Michael Groskopf, and lead guitarist as well as the original vocalist Kai Hansen. This lineup recorded the band's first ever official release, the Helloween EP, which I highly recommend listening to, back in 1985, and later that year, Noise Records released their debut album, Walls of Jericho. The band then toured extensively, but Hansen apparently found playing guitar and singing simultaneously too challenging, so for the band's next album, they decided to hire a singer, and that singer was, of course, Michael Kiske, who many will argue was instrumental in creating that full Helloween sound that everyone associates with the band. And indeed, you might have heard of the two albums they then recorded, Keeper of the Seven Keys, Part 1 and 2. Now, these albums were huge successes. They launched the band into international fame and made Kiske into the quintessential metal screamer of the decade. I mean, I love Bruce Dickinson, but even he would blush at how ridiculous Kiske's vocals were on these albums. And here's when the band's lineup first broke up, when Kai Hansen left. I mean, it was a shocker for the band, but literally their biggest hit off the Keeper albums was a song called I Want Out, which none too subtly indicated that Hansen was getting displeased with how big the band was becoming. And he apparently didn't enjoy touring that much either. Now, if you were to ask Michael Kiske when Helloween's troubles began, he's always been very adamant that it was when Hansen left. Remember, even if he wasn't singing anymore, he was the band's principal songwriter alongside Michael Waycath, and now losing one of their main assets definitely hurt the band. 1990 was also a rotten year because Helloween ended up in a court battle with their record label Noise. Now, I'm not gonna pretend I understand the technicalities of this legal battle or why the band were suing the label. I know it had something to do with the merger with the major label EMI, but it hurt the band in the sense that they weren't able to record a new album or tour for nearly a year, which is an infinity in the lifespan of a metal group, especially one still on its way up. Eventually, the record deals were settled, Helloween ended up under EMI, and Hansen's place as guitarist was taken up by Roland Grappow. But the band was about to experience the first real taste of what trying to run the band without Hansen was like. In 1991, they released Pink Bubbles Go Ape, and you can kinda tell the band was clearly trying to set this one apart from their previous work. But having said that, Pink Bubbles isn't a bad album. I mean, it wasn't as successful as the Keeper album, but if you can get past its really weird facade, it's still a pretty solid metal album. However, it did display an obvious division within the band, and that was basically between Kiske and everyone else. Michael Waycath has explained that the rest of the band were heavily in the rock metal scene and really saw themselves belonging to that landscape. Kiske's big idol was the King. Elvis, that is. And unsurprisingly, the band recorded a cover of Blue Suede Shoes for one of the Pink Bubbles singles. So Pink Bubbles maybe put a crack in the band's armor, but it didn't break. For that, you have to look to their 1993 album, Chameleon. Now, you just gotta look at the album covers for the band's previous and their subsequent albums, and you can tell from a mile away that this thing is something else. Chameleon might actually be one of the most hated metal albums in history. This thing is infamous. But is it a bad album? I mean, not really, but the problem is that it's just overproduced and most of the songs are just kinda eh. But once the band went on tour, it was a disaster. It was becoming obvious that Kiske wanted Helloween to go in a more commercial direction, and this just didn't sit right with the rest of the band. One of the singles of the album was a ballad called Windmill, which Ingo Schwichtenberg hated so much, he just started calling it Shitmill. Finally, Kiske got ejected because the rest of the band just couldn't stand him anymore, and Kiske really took it personally, basically turning his back to the whole metal scene for over a decade. And things weren't going so well for Ingo. who famously suffered from schizophrenia. Apart from refusing to take his meds, he also started drinking heavily on tour, and he too ended up getting kicked out of the band. Helloween was in shambles by the beginning of 1994, but then regrouped with a new drummer and singer, Andy Darris, who's fronted the band ever since. Unfortunately, the story ends on a sad note for Ingo, who killed himself in 1995. Well, how did the band end up coming back together? Well, remember Hansen? He went on to form his own band called Gamma Ray. After recording his first 3 albums with singer Ralph Scheepers, Hansen returned to singing duty, which he has been doing in the band ever since. Kiske released his first solo album in 1995, and though he was trying hard to make it as a popular musician, he still dabbled with the metal scene from time to time. In 2008, he released his last solo album, Past in Different Ways, which included acoustic versions of songs from all 4 of his Helloween albums. Then in 2010, Kiske and Hansen created a band called Unisonic, which released its first album in 2012. Yeah, you can kind of tell that Kiske and Hansen really like each other. Aww. And then of course, these two eventually worked their way back into Helloween, and despite the fact that Kiske had some vocal issues at the start of the Pumpkins United tour, it's been largely a success. Well, I hope you enjoyed the video. I'm TheHande, see you on the next one.